It begins as a whisper, a place without signs or instruction, just shape and silence. The horizon is broken only by the gentle curve of something ancient, wind sculpted and breathing in slow motion. You don't quite know where you are, only that you've stepped into a landscape that rearranges you. And then the light moves. At first, it's subtle. A ridge glows, a shadow deepens. It's the kind of performance you could miss if you blink. But if you stand still long enough, you realize the whole desert is alive with a quiet rhythm. The dunes rising and falling like the breath of the valley itself. They don't announce themselves, they emerge. And before you know it, you're in the middle of the Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes, tucked near a place called Stovepipe Wells in the heart of Death Valley. You've probably seen photos, but nothing prepares you for being there. They were formed from centuries of wind-blown sand funneled through mountain passes, remnants of an ancient lake basin sculpted into long waves of gold and shadow. And if you're lucky, if you catch it just right, you'll find yourself standing perfectly still, watching light roll across the landscape like it's got something to say. If you've never been there, you've definitely missed something. The dunes shift constantly, yet somehow look timeless. At sunrise and sunset, the sand glows like it's holding fire beneath the surface. It's not just beautiful, it's theatrical. Waves of light roll across the curves, and if you're lucky, you'll catch a moment where everything, the wind, the light, your breath, just lines up. It's like nature hit pause and said, "Look closely, this moment was meant for you." Here's a fun fact. Mesquite trees, the ones that poke up through the otherwise perfect sand, have roots that can reach down over 60 feet in search of water. 60 feet! That's deeper than most people's commitment to finishing a New Year's resolution. These trees don't just survive, they dig in and hold on. And when you're out there alone, in silence, with nothing but sand and wind and your own thoughts, those mesquite, they start to look like introverts at a party, keeping their distance but still very much present. So back to that light. When I first opened the RAW file, my exact thought was, oh no, did I accidentally shoot this with a potato? Well, jokes aside, I knew the shot was in there, buried under boring tones and quiet shadows that didn't reflect what it felt like to stand there. I start with the exposure, lifting it up gently like I'm waking the photo from a nap. Then I go into the 4 essential sliders: highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Each one plays a role in helping the image breathe. Lower the highlights to calm the brightest areas, lift the shadows to reveal the soft curves tucked in the darker parts of the dunes, and push the whites to let the sun-kissed ridges pop. And of course nudge the blacks to ground the image with a bit more weight. As I go through these, I'm watching the image start to feel like that moment again. It's not finished, but it's beginning to sound like the desert. It's unfolding slowly, quietly, and with purpose. It was January of 2017. I was out there alone, boots crunching on the cold sand, chasing the last light of day. One side of each dune glowed gold, while the other dipped into blue-gray. It felt like standing between two worlds, warmth and chill, hope and stillness. I remember thinking, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's rare, isn't it? That feeling. Most of the time, we're scrolling, rushing, wondering if we left the stove on. But here everything just stopped. Now, Once the global sliders set the tone, I move into local adjustments. I start with a linear gradient at the bottom of the image to pull forward the fine ripple textures that are in the sand. Subtle but grounding. Then I add another gradient from the top left to soften the light up there, followed by one from the top right to maintain balance and preserve the gentle directional light flow. After that, I place a radial gradient on the left side, just over the ridge where the sunlight hits. It's a light touch, enough to enhance the warmth already there without forcing anything. There's a second radial I'm thinking about, but it's not there yet. Still deciding whether the scene calls for it or if it's best left alone. Each move here is about balance. I'm not trying to dramatize the dunes, just letting them return to the calm, glowing presence they had when I was standing there. The result? The soft but confident texture like the dunes are exhaling. And as the image starts to reflect what I saw, I can feel myself drifting back to that moment it was taken. That scene wasn't just about light. It was a memory etched into cold sand and soft wind. What's that memory? Living by myself one winter, quiet nights where the silence was so thick I could hear my own thoughts. And they weren't always friendly. But that isolation brought a strange kind of peace. Like the dunes themselves were listening. The air smelled like wild herbs and cold dirt, and there was this breeze barely enough to stir the sand, but enough to whisper, "You're not alone. You're just wandering with style." That moment of stillness stayed with me. And now, back at my desk, staring at the photo, I wanted to protect that feeling. The image couldn't just look right. It had to move right. Flow the way the wind did. So, let's give this wandering some direction. I shift the white balance warmer because the cold tones just weren't doing justice to that end of day glow. This is where I fine-tune the tones that are already there, not by changing the light, but by working with the colors already captured. I start nudging the oranges, yellows, and even some of the blues, pulling warmth into the highlights, taming the cooler shadows. It's not about drama, just a bit of refinement, like adjusting the tone of a memory until it feels just right. Next comes clarity and texture. Texture is for the scent. Clarity, that's for the midtones. Think of it like sharpening a knife, but gently. Then came the moment of indecision. Do I stay and let the colors evolve right there, or do I hike to that other dune and risk missing it all? That's the eternal struggle for photographers, isn't it? The fear of better light. There's always a better ridge, a better sky, a better what if. I think of that moment every time I reach for that clarity slider, because clarity, like a decision, adds weight. It defines the edges, and just like standing between two dunes wondering which one holds the better glow, I have to make a call. The wind picked up. The sand started dancing around my boots, and I swear the shadows at my feet were inching forward like they knew something I didn't. Speaking of knowing things, from there I revisit the basics, making final light adjustments with exposure, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. This isn't about making big changes anymore, just refining. It's like walking through a room you just cleaned and straightening one last picture frame. Only then do I add the second radial gradient. This one brings out just a bit more light from the left, catching that curve in the dune I almost missed. With the photo nearly where I wanted, I open it into Photoshop for the final cleanup. Nothing major, just enough to remove distractions so the photo feels intentional and not interrupted. I closed my eyes for a second and just listened. There was this soft hiss of wind-blown sand, the cold brushing against my cheek, and this tiny patch of warmth still hanging on to my jacket from the sun. It felt like the entire landscape was telling me where to look. And sure enough, the ridges formed a perfect lead line, like the dunes were saying, "Come on, this is the moment, we're waiting for you." Back on the editing bench, I focus on the final touches that tie everything together. I duplicate the image layer and apply a gentle blur filter, then I adjust the layer style settings to create a soft, dreamy atmosphere. Just enough to add a bit of mood without losing the shape of the light. Next, I fix a light leak that had worked its way into the bottom of the frame. It's subtle but distracting, so with a few small tweaks, it's gone. Then I add some darkness to the bottom edge of the photo to help ground the composition and pull the viewer's eye inward. With those changes in place, the image finally begins to feel still. Not static, still, like it's finished speaking and now it's just breathing. The light is soft but intentional. The tones are balanced. The distractions are gone and the bottom edge carries just enough weight to hold everything in place. These final refinements aren't about polish. They're about respect. Respect for the moment I stood in and the story the image is now ready to carry forward. And just when I was finishing the last few touches, stepping back, letting the image breathe, it brought me back to what happened next. I moved toward the next dune and the sky lit up in pinks and purples like it had been saving the show just for me. That moment, the one I was worried I might miss, was waiting. I just had to trust my gut and keep walking. That's the thing with chasing light. It rewards the patient and slightly cold desert wanderers with a tripod over their shoulder and sand in their ears. So, here we are, the before and after. The raw image, honest but shy. The final version, it speaks. It says, I was there, I saw this, and I felt it. And I hope when you look at it, you feel it too.